are listening to the Heartland Author Podcast. I am Aaron Apollo Camp. For this episode, I had the opportunity to interview Caroline Fernandez. Caroline, who is from Canada, is the author of many children's and middle grade books, including books in the Asha and Baz and the Adventures of Grandmasaurus series. I'm here with Caroline Fernandez, who is a children's and middle grade book author from Canada. Caroline, welcome to the Heartland Author Podcast.
Hi, Aaron. It's nice to hear from you today.
Feel free to introduce yourself to our listeners.
Thanks. My name is Caroline. I live in Toronto, Ontario, which is, in fact, yes, in Canada. I'm the author of about 15 children's books. I write picture books, chapter books, and I have a new middle grade novel coming out next year.
Without spoiling too much about your books, how many have you written, and what are some of your more notable ones about?
Oh, great question. So as I said, I think there's about 15 right now and counting. My biggest book series is Asha and Baz, which is a chapter book series. It highlights women in STEM and real-life women in history who have made amazing discoveries, overcome challenges, and do not quite have the time in the history books that they really deserve. Book 3 of this series just came out in September, and I just finished writing book 6 this week. So yeah, it's got a good long series for chapter book readers who are like grades 1 to 3, or if they're readers who are having some difficulty reading for the high, low, middle grade audience, I think as well might enjoy these books because they're pretty high action. And you can read the series independently. Each book is a standalone, but because it's the same characters in the books. Asha and Baz are 2 kids who in class get a class challenge, and they use a stick that they found on the playground, which happens to be a magic stick, which time travel them back in time to meet a woman in STEM who has made an amazing discovery relating to that class activity. So in the first book, they met Mary Sherman Morgan, who was an American rocket scientist. In book 2, they met Hedy Lamarr, who was, of course, a very famous actor and inventor. And in book 3, they go back in time and they meet Elizabeth Friedman, who was a World War II codebreaker. And so I think that this series is kind of like the meat to my dinner sort of thing. It has it's taken a lot of time, and it has a lot of attention these days.
Now, for some of our listeners who may have never heard of the acronym STEM before, that's an acronym meaning science, technology, engineering, and mathematics.
Correct. And it's really popular. There are STEM classes in schools these days, and also a lot of school libraries and public libraries frequently feature STEM books because science, technology, engineering, and math is it's a really interesting category for kids to read because it's, studies have shown that if kids get early introduction to these subjects, they become lifelong enjoyers of those subjects as well.
Now, did Commandeer Press, which is a company, I think I've interviewed like 1 or 2 other authors from that publishing company, did they publish all or some of your books?
Oh, yeah, yes, I believe you have. I think you have had Kirsten Marion, who did the Lucy and Dee series from Commandeer Press. I believe that colleague has interviewed with you before. Commandeer Press has published all of the Asha and Baz books, and has also published I have a picture book series with them called The Adventures of Grandmasaurus. And that so far is a 3-book series, also with Commandeer Press. Also with Commandeer Press, Stop Reading This Book, which is a really fun picture book. And above that, I also have published with DC Canada Education Publishing, a picture book with them, and my middle grade will be with DCB Cormorant, which is also a Canadian publishing company. So I'm
Now,
Canadian publishers all around so far.
now, if some or all of your books contain illustrations, who did the illustration work?
Oh, all of them did actually. For the Asha and Baz series, I am working with the very talented Dharmali Patel, who illustrates the chapter books. For the picture books, I have worked with Shannon O'Toole for the Grandmasaurus series, and also for Stop Reading This Book. And for the hide and seek picture book, I have worked with Erin Mercer. And it's interesting because with each book or book series, working with the illustrators, we have different ways in which we collaborate. Some are very hands off on my part, where the illustrator has just gone ahead and done their own drawing in hide and seek, the picture book. With Shannon O'Toole for the Grandmasaurus series, she gets the text, and we kind of collaborate a little bit back and forth. But with the Asha and Baz series, because it is so based in true historical facts, that I give Dharmali a kind of timeline with examples of what Elizabeth Friedman looked like, what her house looked like, what the code that she was working on looked like, because those books have a creative aspect to it, but they are deeply, deeply well rooted in American history as well. So we want to ensure that they are correct.
Now, when you talk about community over competition in book publishing, what do you mean by that? Because I saw that as a suggested topic for an interview on your Podmatch page. I figured I'd ask a question about that.
Oh, that's great. Well, I find that especially children's publishing, it's competitive because everybody wants to get the book deal, but at the same time, we need to lift each other up when the books come out, sort of thing. And really, you don't need to think of your fellow creators as competition so much as colleagues. And when you have something to share, to promote a book, if you see somebody else with their book coming out, or if they have a manuscript question, I think we are stronger as a community to lift each other up and support each other in our endeavors, because it is such a small industry, and it's tough. The small independent publishers have tighter budgets compared to the big five publishers. And so every help that you can give an author or an illustrator in helping to promote their book, or in helping to give them a connection to somebody in the industry, or to cheer on their event, I think what you put out, it also comes back to you, and it's kind of being a good community member, which I think it's important for all, even established and emerging kid-lit creators. You need to help each other out as much as you can.
Now, this is your opinion. Can anyone write a children's book?
Oh, okay. My opinion is anybody who can write a children's book if they want to self-publish, because it's just as easy as having a printer, a computer, and you can print it yourself. I think if you want to have a traditionally published book, I don't think just anybody can do that. There is, writing has an amazing creative component to it, and you could be the best researcher if you happen to like to do historical books like I do. But you do need to have an education of sorts in how to craft a manuscript, and how to write a pitch letter, and how to write an elevator pitch, and what your hook is going to be, and how to sell your book to a traditional publisher. So I think my advice to anybody who wants to write a book is write the book that you want to write. But when it comes to publishing the book, you need to decide whether, if you want to self-publish, then that's fantastic, and it goes out to friends and family, and you should be very proud of, the thing that you create. If you want to be traditionally published, then you need to do a lot of homework into the industry, into the publishers that you are submitting to. You need to acquaint yourself with their catalogs. You need to check out, competitive titles, because if you want to write a book on teacups and there's already a book on teacups that's come out this year, publishers are not going to be as likely to publish it. So, long answer to your short question. No, not everybody can publish a traditionally published book, but anybody can write a book that they want to put their heart into.
I would argue that even if an author goes the self-publishing route with children's books, not everyone's really cut out to write for children. For example, I would be someone who isn't really cut out to write children's literature because I've never liked being around small children except when I was one.
Right. Well, and there's also, any writer can write anything, but is that going to sell? Not every book is sellable. And I've certainly seen a lot of, a lot of manuscripts that, need a professional editor's eyes, and they need a book cover designer. And so if self-publishing could be really, if you truly just want to write a story for friends and family, yes, you can. But you're right, not everybody can write for children. And not everybody knows what the different genres are, because children's publishing sounds like a great big umbrella, but it really is like picture books, nonfiction, fiction, middle grade, chapter books, graphic novels, I said middle grade, young adult, then there's new adult, like there's a whole bunch of subcategories, high, low, middle grade, that fall into it. And if you need to know what your word count is going to be. Like a middle grade book is not a picture book. The word counts are different. The topics are different. The type of vocabulary is different. So that goes back into, if you want to be traditionally published, and if you want to have a sellable book, yes, you absolutely have to do your homework. Not everybody can do that.
What are some of the latest trends in children's book publishing that weren't trends or weren't even around a decade or more ago?
Oh, definitely graphic novels. I think they are picking up a whole new group of readers that are more visual. Especially with the pandemic, a lot of kids are a little bit behind in their reading levels because of the school time that was missed. And I think graphic novels are, and especially boys as well, are picking up a visual reader. And some people think that graphic novels aren't reading. I disagree. I think that reading is reading, and if a kid is holding a book, that is reading, and you don't need to dissect it more than that. But there are books that have. Kenneth Oppel wrote a book called Silverwing, and it's a million copy bestseller here in Canada, and it's a middle grade novel. It just came out with a graphic novel, and it's 20th anniversary after the first book was published. So that whole series is going to get a second generation life because of the middle grade aspect that is now coming out. Not middle grade, pardon me. The graphic novel part of it. So I think graphic novels, definitely a new trend, and I think it's a trend that's going to stay and stick.
For my final question, as it's fall in the Northern Hemisphere when this interview is being recorded, what children's activities do you recommend in the fall months?
Oh, it's all pumpkin carving and stuff up here. Going out, doing hikes, going out and seeing the change of colors. We up here in Toronto have great foliage changes up here. So going for hikes, and then of course you can take those colorful leaves home and make some great art to stick on the fridge.
Caroline, you were an amazing guest for this podcast, and I thank you for appearing on the Heartland Author Podcast.
Thank you so much for your time, Aaron. I really enjoyed it.
Caroline was a wonderful guest to interview, and it's always wonderful to interview authors who have written books published by Commandeer Press. This is Aaron Apollo Camp reminding y'all to write your imagination. Bye for now. You can learn more about me and my book writing projects at campaaronapollo.wixsite.com/authoraac. You can follow me on Facebook at AuthorAAC and on Instagram at AACScribe. Copyright 2023, Aaron Apollo Camp, all rights reserved. This podcast episode is intended for the private listening of our audience. Any reuse or retransmission of this podcast episode without the express written consent of the podcast host is prohibited, except under fair use guidelines. Royalty-free music and sound effects obtained from https://www.zapsplat.com.